Dawson Rider with you.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here. Welcome to my review for the special Power Rangers Lightning Collection in Space Psycho Ranger set. Our first ever 5 team pack. I wanted to start going over a couple things about the packaging just because it is kind of a unique situation here. As you can see, like, it's a one long piece of packaging. That sounded weird. But you know, it's just one long piece. It's not like a bunch of separate figures or anything. And they got the nice box art of all 5 of them, which looks really cool. So if you're a box collector, that's a really nice little display piece. And it just looks professional. And it's a little bit thicker than the average box. Hey-oh, which is kind of nice. So it ships nicely and it's not going to have as much risk of damaging. And then on the inside, you have a little blurb about the story of the show version of the In Space Psycho Rangers in a bunch of languages. So that's kind of cool. It just makes it seem a little bit more premium there as well. I just wanted to take a minute to talk about inside the box. Hey-oh, the Rangers are just all sitting there on top getting ready to be reviewed, but I wanted to talk about the accessories real quick before I forgot them. They each have their own individual little Sith lightning hand, and there are different styles, as you can see to them, so they're not all the same one, which is kind of neat. Red comes with one of the generic effects. Yellow comes with a generic effect. Pink is the only one with a unique one, which isn't really that unique because Ranger Slayer had one, but it's a cool effect for her bow, which is neat. So you get all that par for the course stuff. You get some alternate basic hands here for just all the Rangers in addition to the holding weapons hands they have. So basically you get some standard hands, holding weapons hands, and then the lightning hands. And they all come in this nice silver packaging here, and like when they're already in there, when you open them, it actually looks kind of cool like that. So for whatever reason, if you wanted to display it like that. But I wanted to show this because I wanted to point out and complain that when you get it, there are these little security straps in here that they're all attached to by their shoulders. Despite the fact that when you press them in the plastic, it's a tight fit. And it's really obnoxious, to be honest. The longest time I spent on this review is probably going to be getting these out of the box and clipping the little security straps. My life is more difficult than anyone else's, including the starving children, so don't ask. The main point is I just found it to be kind of unnecessary. They're the first Lightning Collection figures that were like that. I mean, I guess you don't want people to steal these off-store shelves out of the packaging in Amazon's warehouse after you get it out of the cardboard box it's sealed in. But anyway, let's get to the main event. Okay, so we have all 5 of them out of box now, and we'll be going over them individually, and then after that I will be taking a look at them compared to, specifically red and blue compared to their previous releases, blue on his own as a GameStop exclusive, and red with the Lost Galaxy figure, and then I will take a look at the 3 guys compared to their Legacy counterparts, as the girls never got a release in the Legacy line. Hey-oh, there's lots of hey-ohs in this review. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm only going to go over the articulation in terms of what's featured for one guy and one girl since they're the same mold, but I will mention any specific issues to them as I go along. So just talking about Psycho Black here, he looks pretty badass. I really like the look of him. Kind of all my general thoughts about the Psycho figures still stand with him since he's the same mold as the other 3 I've gotten with green, blue, and red before this, is that I still think the Legacy sculpt is a little more accurate. With this one, obviously, you have a little bit of trouble where the primary black color and like the visor and the secondary black color all kind of blend together, but he still looks pretty badass. I think it's a solid and decent figure, but I just think it more represents a more stylized comic version of the character as opposed to the other one for Legacy where the helmet for me looks a little more accurate. But I think all the details are fine. Fortunately with Black, I don't have any problems with any little paint nicks. There are some in this one that did get some of those, so we'll see that. You got his weapon here, which I think looks pretty solid. The silver is nice and shiny. It's kind of hard to mess up because all you need is this shiny silver and then this one black plastic piece, and you'll see it in the comparison, but this one's a lot less malleable compared to the Legacy one where it doesn't warp as easy, which is kind of a nice maximum warp, but no warp. So articulation here, you got your standard figure arts, not figure arts, wow, I'm so used to saying that, standard Lightning Collection articulation here. You got your ball joint here, it's all clicky, and your hinge, and your swiveling, and your double elbow joint, swiveling at the fist, nice ball joint here on the leg, double knee joint, you have your hinge here on the foot, you have your chest and waist articulation, you kind of have this hinge here, and then the ball joint, oh, sorry about that, out of focus for a second, and the head and neck articulation. So just as well as articulated as the rest, a little bit of hindered in some places, and the only specific call out I have for this is that his legs aren't loose, but they're that style where you can feel like they could become loose in the future, like they're right on the edge. Okay, now our first time reviewing a girl mold for a Psycho Ranger period. Unfortunately, I did get some little paint nicks in there on hers, which is kind of par for the course, which is one of the reasons I was worried about the security straps, because if you take the scissors in from here, you might scratch this, you might nick it. So that's kind of annoying. And then if you go from the back, you have to pull the straps out with the scissors and you might nick your fingers. So it's just dangerous. Again, my life's more difficult than everyone else's. But overall, it's pretty much what I expected. I feel like the helmets should be a little bit smaller for their bodies because they're girls. Like, it makes it look like they have a little bit of a bobblehead thing going on, just to differentiate them a little bit. So basically, my same thoughts on the mold stand here, that it looks fine for like a comic version. I think the paint, look at this paint. The paint on the yellow looks fine, but I just kind of think it looks more stylized, and mainly my thought on their helmets for both yellow and pink is I wish they were a little bit smaller. Maybe that's just me and I'm imagining that they were more calibrated in the show, but it just feels like they have a little bit of no neck going on. But same good details, it's a decent mold. The chest on all these is a little bit puffy. I feel like they could be toned down a little bit, like their chest armor pieces on all of them, guy and girl alike. But the details are all fine on them. You have her weapon here, her like evil version of the satellite stunner, which actually looks pretty cool. I forgot about this one. I feel like I've just been seeing so much of the guys one since we've gotten all those releases that I forgot she had this, and it actually looks pretty cool. And articulation is pretty much just the same, but a female version. No loose joints to speak of on her, which is really nice. So I shouldn't have to worry about that. But all the same articulation, there's really no differences to speak of that are worth noting for that. So for the most part, I'm happy with it. It's pretty much exactly what I expected, but I'm not exactly over the moon about it. So then we have red here, of which we've already gotten a release for, and again, the articulation is the same. One thing I will say positive about this one versus the one I got in my Lost Galaxy set is I don't have really any noticeable paint nicks on this one, whereas the Lost Galaxy set one had a notable like stripe right here and a couple other little ones, but other than that, they're pretty close to identical too, in my opinion. I'll do the comparison here in just a few minutes, but for me, they're pretty close to being identical. And he does come with a sword, which is pretty much the same also in my opinion. I feel like there's gonna be someone in the comments who are like, oh my god, Dawson, how could you not notice this is obsidian and the other one was onyx? But it's like pretty, hey, onyx, that's a planet. Anyway, so we have pink here, again, same points to stand, no loose joint problems to speak on her. You do have little bits of paint problems, like right here, there's a little blob right here that makes it seem like it's like a tear or like her helmet's blobbing out a little bit more, but it's basically the same mold. But I think the pink looks good. I can't think of any of them that are really inaccurate to the show. Maybe not perfect, but certainly not inaccurate. But basically my same thoughts for yellow, except with a pink figure. She does have her bow here, which looks good and is pretty cool. And like I said, you have that effect part, which I showed you, which is nice. I do like when they have effect parts that aren't just the standard 2 or 3 that are included and actually are something that I would want to use on the figure for display. Now you may be wondering, why is Blue the only one crouched like he took an arrow to the knee? Well, Blue, my main problem with this guy is that he cannot stand. He cannot stand at all. I cannot stand him. Quite literally, I've tried so much that I've finally decided to just improvise and have him in some different positions in this review. But if this is a problem I've only had one other time, and it was recently as this week, was Black Dino Thunder. Not Dino Thunder, Dino Charge, excuse me. That was the first lightning figure I've had that I just could not get to stand. Something about the way he's calibrated. It doesn't matter what I do, I could not get him to stand. So I had that problem with Black Dino Charge, and now I have it with him as well, which is rather annoying. He also has the loosest joints. That's probably related or not related. I don't know. Maybe it's just 2 problems that are different but also are both problems. But he's the only one that I feel like really has loose joints for me of this set of 5, and the not being able to stand part is really, really annoying. But all the details, you know, look the same. They look fine. His color is a little bit different, a little bit brighter than the Legacy release, the initial Lightning release, which I'll get to in a second. That was the only real difference I noticed. But other than that, you know, he's perfectly fine, just like all the others, except for the fact that he can't stand. And then you do have his axe here, which is pretty much identical to the original release and is decently painted. But now let's go ahead and quickly compare them to their Lightning counterparts and then their Legacy counterparts. Okay, so here we have the comparison to their previous Lightning releases. The ones on the inside are the new ones. Blue is the new one on the inside who was being a giant baby and refused to stand, so he's just gonna lie there and think about what he did. And honestly, there's not really any huge difference for me with most of them. Blue has a little bit, but just looking at the red side by side, this is one of those cases where, I mean, I guess this looks a little shinier, but for the most part, it's one of those situations where I'm only noticing differences if I'm really thinking about it. It's nothing hugely noticeable between the reds, in my opinion. Maybe you guys think differently, but other than the differences in paint mistakes, like this guy has a few more paint nicks on my original release, and even the swords, it's like they're so close. I really don't see anything huge for me personally. They're pretty much near identical for me unless I really sit there and overthink it, which I'm really good at doing, but I don't necessarily need to do it in this case. Now with blues, I did notice that the camera wasn't focusing on them. With blues, I did notice a little bit more of a shiny difference on the new one. Like, the helmets almost look the same. This looks a little more shinier, I think, because of the angle. But as far as the chest piece goes, the blue plastic on this one does look a little more shiny. Except his problem is this dude can't stand. He's got the same problem as I have with my black Dino Charge Ranger. So he has a hard time standing. So this one, there is a slightly noticeable difference, but it's not necessarily a huge deal. So the differences are relatively minor. This one, for sure, for me, the reds are identical. Okay, so now we have them with our legacy counterparts. I'm gonna go over red and blue real quick first, since they've already gotten an overlook. Not the hotel, but in my previous reviews. But kind of all the same points. I think that these do have a little bit more lankier and muscly proportions, but I still stand by my belief that the Psycho Ranger helmets are more accurate just in the helmet department, specifically for the legacy ones. I think that they're a more accurate sculpt. The red color is a little bit brighter on the legacy version of Psycho Red, you can see here, but see, again, for me, like, this looks good for like a comic version. It looks a little bit better from the side, but I still think these are more accurate to the show. But these have a little bit more accurate kind of proportions, even if their chests are a little puffy. I honestly think these are pretty decent. They're not perfect, like they have a little bit of lanky proportions, but again, I stand by the helmets, and I feel like I bring that up in reviews that aren't even related to the Psycho Rangers, but you can see the color differences there going on. And his sword, though, that is worth mentioning, is the swords are different. This one has kind of the more like accurate and well done little like cloth strap on there, whereas this one, if you just look real close, they basically just molded the idea that he wrapped the cloth strap around it. So that is a little bit better plus there for the lightning. Plus here for Legacy is Legacy can stand, unlike this chump. And you can see this is the one with the biggest color difference, as blue is much darker in the lightning version compared to this one. And looking at some photos from the show, this is the more accurate color overall. There's definitely surprisingly a couple shots where it does kind of look light like this, but for the most part I think this is a little bit closer. But again, I think that the helmet's better on this one. Again, bonus though, this dude can stand. What's up with you, man? And then here we have a comparison look at the axes. This one's a little bit less squished. Honestly, outside of this one having more of a matte feeling finish to it, these look pretty similar. It just looks like they took this one and went like this to make this one. Okay, now on to the ones we actually haven't covered yet. These are pretty comparable. They both kind of look the same in terms of the two separate black paint jobs of like the inner and outer colors. Again, I still stand by the lightning sculpt the legacy sculpt. I think that black looks the best in comparison though, for whatever reason, in terms of just comparing these two side by side. I think he just looks the coolest and the most consistent when you're comparing the lightning and the legacy side by side. And his staff is a little bit sturdier. As you can see, this one's really bendable. Not that that can't happen with this one, but I've had less problems with it sort of warping, which is kind of a nice thing. I don't know which one's better at kind of differentiating the colors, because all of his, like, the eyes and the main colors can kind of blend together, but you kind of get the idea for the difference. It's basically, these are the same comparisons. Like, the core mold for all three of these are the same. It's just a different color and how they look on their own, and the fact that this dude can't stand, like, couple I'd say. Okay, so now on to the final verdict. This is overall a pretty cool but imperfect set. It's lots of little mini things that just kind of bother me about it, that hold it back a little bit, but it is pretty neat that we have the Psycho Ranger 5-pack, considering for so many years Psycho Rangers were on the top of everybody's want list. I've mentioned before, but it's kind of funny, like, just like that, for me, I also had that at the top of my want list, but now I feel like we've been talking about them and getting so many releases, like I'm sick of them, like I can't wait to get silver so we can just stop and like I'm done with it. But trying to take that out of it, it's pretty cool that we have it, and even though I don't think the head sculpts are perfect, and I have various little nitpicks about some of the paint mistakes and like him not being able to stand, I think if you're a huge Psycho Ranger fan, I can definitely recommend checking this out. As far as if you already bought the other two, I can say that if you want the full team pack, just go ahead and go for it, and it's easy enough to sell off the other two or find someone else that wants it. So I think if you really want the Psycho Rangers, I think it's worth just getting them all in one swoop. If you haven't bought any yet, do not buy the two individuals, unless you really want Lost Galaxy Red, I guess, but just buy this set. Again, it's imperfect, but pretty neat. My main problem, honestly, with the whole set, outside of my personal preferences, with the helmet is just that blue doesn't stand, and that's something that you might not necessarily experience. As I mentioned, I had that problem with my Dino Charge Black. I think I saw one other person in the comments that had a similar problem, but most other people in the comments didn't. So you could pick this up and have no problems. You could have this set and red might not stand. So just be wary of that, but just because my blue has problems doesn't mean yours will, but it was worth mentioning in terms of the set I got. Anyway guys, that's about it for this one. Until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and climb the steps and ring that bell for notifications for my videos. Dawson Rider, signing out.